Hello, Prashanth Neel. Welcome to Galata Plus. First of all, I want to congratulate you for what I think is a rather emotional reason. I think you have, in a way, made Shankar Nag's dream come true. He dreamt of taking Kannada cinema to an international level. I'm not saying that this is a defining moment, but you've kind of broken out of this Karnataka thing. So congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
Now, coming to KGF, again, like we just spoke, it's broken across India, but you didn't have the kind of budgets that other industries have. When you look at KGF on screen, it looks massive, it looks epic, it looks everything, but you were still constrained by certain things, right?
When we started off making this movie, we didn't have the intention of making it into a pan-India movie.
You've said that, yeah.
To make a pan-India movie, Bahubali was out by then. The understanding for all of us back then was that, you have to have a very big scale. You have to have not probably established actors in every language, but scale was a very big factor. When we started making this movie, the scale of the movie was right in the story. And we had to, put in a lot of effort to make that world look real. And the agenda was very clear that, we were still making a Kannada movie with a very, very big star. The star had, Yash had so much more potential to him, though he was one of the biggest stars.
Right.
The only thing that was on our minds was that whilst Yash's stardom was there, we were still spending more than he had made with his biggest blockbuster. So we had to keep that in mind, but we had to achieve this particular world. So that world is something that, it took a lot of effort from all of my technicians, be it Bon Gowda, be it Shiv Kumar. We all had this agenda fixed that, we're going to do this in a manner where the world is going to look big, but we're not going to spend as much. And how we achieved that was with nature itself. Use a lot of dust, use a lot of smoke, use a lot of fire, and all these things. I think it was, it's misconstrued that cinema, if you want to make a big movie, that, you have to put in a lot of budgets into it. And a lot of people have told me that, that if you have a Vijay Kiragandur, if you have a Hombale, if you have a big star like Yash, then it becomes very easy for you to make a pan-India movie. Otherwise, we can't dream of it. Of course, you can dream about something like that. That is now it's coming to light, with various cinemas that are coming recently, that people will accept movies for its drama. The drama becomes the scale of the movie sometimes. The character becomes the scale of the movie sometimes. And I think it's a question that has been answered, that, you don't have to put in a lot of money for something like this. We just put in a hell of a lot of effort. We used to wake up at 6. We used to get our shot going at 6:45 sometimes. If we don't do that, if we don't get enough shots in a day, then, we're not going to be able to do it with that budget. We went over budget, but that's not a budget of a pan-India movie. Or so we thought at that point of time. Right. Also, there's one more thing that, with the scale of the movie that we talk about is that, we have a lot of influence with Hollywood. We want it, the more it looks like a Hollywood movie, the more the scale goes up. And I think we were able to achieve that kind of look and feel with a very limited budget because of the technical knowledge that my technicians had at that point of time. We put in a lot of effort just to try and get it right on that particular day. And the sun was right for us at that point of time. So I was very lucky to have a technical team going for me.
So your first film, Ulagam, was a fairly simple, when you just take the plot alone, it's a fairly simple damsel in distress kind of story. But what elevated it really was the way you treated it and the way you stylized it. When you finished it, what was the learning that you got? What I'm saying is, because there are certain techniques in KGF that I find in Ulagam as well, especially bits of editing and things like that. So what was the knowledge that you took away from Ulagam? And at what point did you say, my next film has to be KGF?
I think I learned everything from Ulagam. I hadn't worked under anybody at that point of time. So for me, it became like going to college. In cinema, probably this is something that applies to other industries also. I quickly learned something from cinema, that there are no teachers in cinema, but there are always students in cinema, which means basically that, you cannot teach cinema to somebody. but you observe what others are doing and you learn from that. So, you're always going to be a student. If you're a good student without a teacher, then I think you will be able to understand cinema very fast. It's not just about learning what lens you have to put, what kind of editing you have to do, what editing suit you use. It's not just about that, but there's something to it that you quickly learn. You either learn it or you don't. With Ugram, it became very important for me to learn what is my strength today is editing. I took probably 6-7 months to learn editing. I started off with FCP, and that took a little bit of time, but I somehow understood what editing was.
Right.
And when I started editing it, I realized very soon that
editing Ugram.
Editing Ugram. I realized that there are so many other ways that I could have taken a shot. There are so many important, it's like if you have a steady shot in a particular scene, and when you start editing it, you just think, I wish I had put a trolley for this shot. And I think I learned a lot of direction from the editing that I learned, and that sort of became my strength. I don't think KGF had anything to do with what I did with Ugram. I think KGF was a very big idea in my head, which I thought, I will do many years down the line. I necessarily did not have to come after that. But, there were big thinkers that put a net out, and I got caught in that net. And because of them, KGF happened. I don't think that I decided to make KGF. I think KGF decided that I should make it at that point of time.
So was there something else that you wanted to make after Ugram?
I wanted to make a very family movie.
Okay.
Because I did not get a lot of audiences to come in because of the kind of genre that I was touching. So I wanted to make a very proper family movie, like a Yajamana or maybe a Brindavana, something, where I can bring in families. And my mother used to tell me all the time that, you've put in too much of violence, that's why nobody's going to watch your movies. So,
what did she say after seeing KGF 1 and 2?
She still tells me that I should tone down my violence. I think the thinking changes because, something works, but it doesn't work so big that, you get audience into the theatre. And finally, I'm making a movie to bring in audiences to the theatres, like everybody else does. So I felt that I had failed with an Ugram when it came to that section of the audience. When I set out to make something with a family kind of audience, and my strength was Ugram at that point of time. So they wanted me to make something like that.
Right.
And they said it doesn't matter that, we have to convince just one section of the audience. Let's try and do it with everything.
It's interesting that both films revolve around a promise made to a mother, that is Ugram and KGF. Both films feature a lawless land, Mughal in Ugram and that KGF camp, or whatever you want to call it. Was it completely coincidental that these elements just repeated themselves, or is there a bit of authorship going on that these are elements that you're going to plant in your films?
So when it comes to the mother, I have a very strong emotion with a mother sentiment. I think that gets me every single time.
Right.
And that has been my biggest influence. So I bring it in because it's also necessary for the particular plot. I don't say, okay, let me start with the mother sentiment and then take it there. The second part of your question, I think growing up, I watched Westerns.
Right.
Lawless lands. I watched World War II dramas. Again, it comes to a setting where once you have a setting of lawlessness, then you always tend to get bigger villains,
right,
and hence you tend to get bigger heroes,
right.
So that's something that I quickly, it probably is my handicap, that I cannot think about setting a story in a very normal place, because I won't be able to bring out the kind of villains that I want to,
right,
and hence I can't bring out that heroism,
right.
So it was a very conscious effort for me to do that. I thought people might not accept it because it borders on fantasy.
Yeah.
It probably is fantasy. I'm very sure that, if I will try all my life, whenever I'm making commercial movies, to set it in parallel universes.
It's interesting because you actually have, like the old Hollywood westerns, the concept of El Dorado. You actually call it El Dorado. You don't Indianize the term. Yeah, except that you set this western in a kind of a more social, within cities, as opposed to total frontier lands and things like that.
Trick with something like that is you humanize it.
Right.
You make it seem real by putting in the same values, the same human values that you see on a daily basis. So you're not going too far away from the world that you're living in.
Right.
This could happen in suburbs of Chennai. It could happen somewhere else. But I'm putting it in a world where I have to first convince you with that world.
Right.
So I try to put in a world like that to dramatize it.
Right.
Because I don't want to fall behind with showing you scale through characters.
Right.
The characters become very, very important part of the story, and I don't think I'll be able to. I'm not brave enough to put in characters that are present in your world today. But somewhere people start to think that this could be real. World War happened,
yeah,
and you don't know what happened. So that's why even KGF, we set it in a period.
Right.
So people will not question us too much about something like that.
Like you said, it was always something that you wanted to make, except that you wanted to make it down the line sometime because it was such a big vision. But what was the seed of that vision? What was the thing that brought about KGF? Was it an article that you read? Was it like a movie that you saw? Was it a story?
I think I've said this before also. I think I was very hugely influenced by the movies of the 70s.
Right.
Amitabh Bachchan sir's movies. And those movies, most of those movies always had gold smuggling in it.
Right.
So I wanted to do something with gold. And when I went on a shoot for Ugram to KGF, that's when I realized that it was this barren land, and people had stopped mining there. And that's when the idea hit me. It was very fascinating to know what happened there.
Right.
And then I wove a whole different story around something like that.
Right.
I could have probably put it anywhere else. It didn't have to be gold at that point of time.
Yeah.
But I think these two things came together. The 70s
and
the gold smuggling back then, and this. So then I thought about the USSR and USA waging war and how the gold prices went up. So I said, okay, this is the perfect setting.
About Divar, you just mentioned that, and the influence is very obvious, and there are deliberate homages at certain points. See, the most iconic scene in Divar is like, okay, the film is filled with iconic scenes, but let me pick, for most people, the most iconic scene is the confrontation between the brothers, and one is on this side of the law and one is on that side of the law. And Amitabh Bachchan asks him, like, Shashi Kapoor, I have Gadi, I have Bangla, I have this, I have that, what do you have? And of course, Shashi Kapoor says, Mere paas maa hai, I have our mother, because the mother figure stands for everything that is good and holy and pure and virtuous and all that kind of stuff. He says, I would rather choose this compared to your Gadi and Bangla and all those kinds of things. So material things that Amitabh has. And that was the India of the 70s, the social fabric of the 70s under the socialist. KGF turns that on this head because the mother herself kind of tells him, you are nothing if you don't have money. And for me, that is fascinating because on the one hand, you're paying homage to Divar and you're turning Divar on its head because now the mother is actually telling the son, bloody hell, go get money, otherwise nobody's going to respect you. How did you see that?
Again, that comes to human values. You put in cinema things that work for you on screen. But I've seen a lot of instances. My own grandfather was in VISL. He was working in a steel plant as an officer, and he never took a bribe. So all his children cursed him many years later. He's a big hero, but many years later they cursed him for not making enough money for them, when their rainy days. When you think about a mother, she's gone through all this hardship in her life.
Right.
and she's frustrated, and she wants to see her son not being in her place ever. You know, it's the kind of emotion that oozes out, and I wanted to capture that more than anything else.
Right.
You know, I don't think we know what really happens in a home like that. I chose to treat it with frustration.
Right.
That, you know, she tells him, you know, her last words are that, you know, I want you to die a rich man. I don't care how you live.
Yeah.
Because she was dying a very poor lady. That's an emotion that you know, the way we have treated that character was a very risky thing in itself.
Yeah.
You know, because no mother is ever going to say, you know, you go out there and beat the shit out of that guy.
Yeah.
You know, you do this, you know, become more harsh, more brash. Nobody does that.
Yeah.
But you know, it all comes from human values. You study enough people and you know that this can be possible.
Right.
And if it is possible, then you can put it on celluloid.
Right. And now it actually seems that KGF is actually more practical than Divar, which is like the fantasy. The supposed realistic, socio-realistic movie now looks like a fantasy because nobody thinks like Shashi Kapoor anymore. Whereas today, because money's become everything, right? So to most people, it's become the defining, like exactly what the beggar tells the little boy. It's like, if you need power to make money, and then the boy asks, like, how do I get power, right? That's become the defining thing. Why did you want those words to come from a beggar?
The boy needed to get it from somewhere. You know, it was the most practical thing to put there. You know,
Right.
you couldn't tell his headmaster to tell him something like that, or one of his relatives to tell him something like that, because everybody that are around you and wish well for you, they will tell you to just be put. You know, one day you will become a very good farmer. The practical thing was to bring in a madman who really did not know what he wanted to say. You know, who was more philosophical. Madmen are always more philosophical.
Yeah.
And we needed to change the direction the boy was headed in.
Yeah.
And send him in a direction, you know, which is going to give us KGF.
Right. And that madness really comes through in that scene, because he's like, you know, there's a guy going by and then suddenly the rupee notes fall from him, and that scene has this like it's almost like he's getting a vision, you know, like this is what I should do, and then he takes the train to Bombay and goes out there. So
Yeah, that was a scene from the 70s.
Yeah.
Straight away.
How did you decide on the name Rocky?
So Yash had done a movie called Rocky
Right.
a long time back, and we were thinking about what names,
Nickname rather.
nicknames to put up there, and I think I came up with a couple of very big king Sanskrit king names, and you know, he eyeballed me a couple of times, and you know, I said, okay, I get it. And then it was just I think it was spur of the moment. Just thought about it once, and I said, what if they call him Rocky? I said, let's fly with it. I don't think there was a proper design to something like that, but as far as I remember, you know, it was very impromptu.
Now you start part one by having the Prime Minister signing the death warrant of somebody that she says is the biggest criminal in India, or most wanted criminal in India. How do you see Rocky? As a criminal, as an anti-hero?
I see him as both. You know, every criminal in the world will give you an explanation as to why he's doing it. And when you hear his story, you will agree with him.
Right.
Unless he's a madman. You know, so there is an underlying issue with almost everybody in the world today. But some of them chose to be criminals. And they are very confident in their head that that was the only way that they could have done what they did.
Right.
So I don't want to hide the fact that, you know, he was a hero and, you know, he helped a lot of people. He was doing this because, you know, he wanted it done. It could be because of his mother. It could be just because, you know, he started getting the greed of gold. But for me, he is definitely a criminal because he's chosen his path. He's not, you know, just 8 years stabbing somebody because, you know, he needed food.
Yeah.
He knows what he was doing.
Right.
And whether his mother told him to do that or somebody else told him to do that, everybody has some way of working around what they do in this world.
Right.
For him, he chose to be a criminal. He is a criminal. There is no two ways about it.
So, building on the fact that you see him as a criminal, Rocky is this most fascinating character, right? At first, he is a proper gangster. Like in Mumbai, he's a gangster. In Bengaluru, he's a gangster. Then they send him to kill a bigger gangster in Garuda, who's running the KGF mines. And once he enters that place, you kind of steady yourself for a typical transition of heart or a bit of something. You just wait for that. So because he's seeing a lot of cruelty around him. He's also seeing acts of great bravery and kindness, like the man who sacrifices himself for the sake of, not revealing who Yash is and all that. He's seeing all that. And he kills Garuda, and everybody accepts him as their savior, as their messiah. But there is, at the end, you still say that he did that to gain control of KGF and to get these men as his soldiers so that he can continue to mine for gold himself. So that's like this fascinating thing that even though he was probably getting a little influenced by the kindnesses and the acts of bravery and all that kind of stuff in him, his real goal never wavered. In the sense that in chapter 2, the Chacha character says, you're doing the same thing as Garuda does. And the Ichwari Rao character says, like his mother was there to start his journey, but now there's nobody to stop him. Do you think that this man is somebody who misinterpreted his mother's wish and kind of set out on that one path almost like a madman, let's say?
Pure story point of view, I think it is very consistent with the character. It's just that his situation was very different at that point of time. He was
in KGF.
In KGF, he never took his eye off the ball.
Right,
at
that's
any given point
it's very consistent. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think him becoming a messiah was a byproduct of what he was doing there. I think he would have sacrificed everybody for his goal.
Right.
That's something that I strongly believe, and I wanted to make that a point. Yash was very clear that that is how it should come across, but I think it all became a byproduct.
Right.
He was improvising at that point of time. If I am going to be a rowdy still, I'd get shot on day one in KGF. So he was trying to understand this world. He took 25 years, 20 years to understand what Mumbai was, and he was starting to gain control of it.
Right.
He has to give a little time over here in KGF.
Right.
So I think the character was very consistent. It was always meant to be something where, he was trying to understand this world, the difficulties over here. And then all this happened. All the melodrama in KGF happened, which is very natural. When you have bondage, even the worst human being will have that heart, to want to help. And probably it was a design also that we have a big star and we have to put in some of these things. But from pure story point of view, we wanted the ending to work.
Right.
As to why he was there and what he understood from this place, and he was planning all along that if I have to gain control of this place, I need to do this, and I need to do this. I think people also saw the Messiah side of it far bigger than him being a villain, but that is what cinema does to you.
Right.
You can make a hero out of Pablo Escobar also. When you watch his story, he's killed a lot of people, but he looks like a hero. You feel for him when he dies in the end. And this is the earlier point that I told you. That criminals, when they tell you their story, you don't think that they're wrong.
Right.
So that's probably the general idea behind it.
Yeah, because when I was watching KGF 1, I thought this was going to be a typical, okay, hard-hearted man, and then now he's softened by all these cries of pain and this and that and all that, and then you have that twist in the end that this is all done in order to kill Garuda and gain control of KGF. So it's almost like this classic misdirection had happened to kind of I don't doubt that maybe he felt a twinge of compassion for like whatever happened or something like that, but his bigger goal never wavered, and that was, I think, fairly new for a big hero movie kind of thing, right? Because it's like you either have them play outright evil, which they rarely do. But here, this guy was like, he's like from the beginning of part 1 till the end of chapter 2, he's like, I've got my goal set, boss. I'm not going to change. This is what I am. So he's like on that straight, like he's got blinkers on and he's going on saying, this is my mother's wish, this is my mother's wish, this is my mother's wish. And he's kind of on that path.
This is something that I had a thought process in my mind, even that, I could put this right at the end of chapter 2, that it could have been a KGF, it could have been something else, but he would always try to get the world.
Right.
Because he wouldn't settle for anything lesser. If it wasn't KGF, then it would be something else.
Right.
So that was the general thinking behind that character. KGF acted as a medium.
Right.
For him to achieve that quicker.
Right.
To expedite that process, or maybe he would have created another KGF all by himself. But for him at that point of time, it was very. You try and understand the character from the point of what Bombay meant to him at that point of time. That if you ruled the most powerful place in India, that means you would become very, very rich.
Right.
But then that changed because there's this hidden little place somewhere which controlled not just Bombay but everything else.
Yeah. Let's cut to the present and look at the TV anchor story, right? Now, she is at first in utter disbelief and she dismisses the story. Why did you want that disbelief to be so strong at the beginning? In the sense that, let's say you're a TV anchor, right? And you get this curious story, your first instinct would be to like, okay, this is probably unbelievable, but let's just see what it is because it's such a fascinating thing. But she kind of dismisses it outright. So was that a way of fictionalizing this world, or what was the thought process there?
I think that was a way of making this world look more real. Basically, her character makes it more real. All the questions that the audience have, that is this real?
Yeah.
Is
She's
this not?
kind of a stand-in for the...
Yeah. So she probably, that was a character that we were very happy with from the beginning, because we could make the world more real, more believable, because she did not believe that something like this could have happened, because she's seen so many stories in her life, and she's a journalist, so she probably studied history.
Right.
And she's like, how can something like this so big exist in history when I haven't come across it? It's not in any of the textbooks.
Right.
So that was something that sat very beautifully with our design.
There's another thing that I really liked about the touch is that even that book is a little burnt, which she's having.
Yeah.
Even that is a bit, it's like almost somebody like pulled it out of the fire or something.
Correct.
Like that. So
Yeah.
that was a nice touch. Is this character also something that you designed so that from time to time we could take a little breather and do a little recap of events, or a little, so this is why this person did this. Oh, so this is, so that the audience is kind of keeping pace because your film is progressing so breathlessly?
I think that came out of fear also, that that we have a story that's set in the 70s, and it's an extraordinary tale that was set in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. We wanted to give that perspective to the audience, that that even they probably felt like Deepa. They also felt like Anand Ingalgi at that point. Not Anand Ingalgi, but more so like Deepa. That oh, are you serious? Something like this happened. So sometimes you make a few things which are interactive to the audience.
Right.
And we thought that this is one of those things. Probably in hindsight, I should say that it worked because we interacted with the audience. But when we were writing it, we wanted a sense of perspective of the story, where it was headed, and we thought it was an outrageous story to tell. Trying to coin it as a pure fantasy would have been probably a very risky thing for us. So we tried to make it real.
Yeah.
By putting in commentators.
Yeah.
So it's like watching a cricket match, but you have commentators.
Yeah, especially in chapter 2.
Correct.
She kind of becomes that commentator.
She becomes a commentator.
Yeah. When you introduce Rocky to the audience, it's a mass hero appearance. Did you also want to show him like a captured beast?
I think it was, we wanted to give him a very good introduction.
Very good mass
I
introduction.
don't want to sound very intellectual and tell you that, we probably wanted to do that, but that was just commerciality.
Yeah. When you mentioned the journalist that is played by Anant Nag, when chapter 1 and chapter 2 are actually happening on successive days, why didn't you just continue with Anant Nag? Why did you say, I want Anant Nag in the hospital and Prakash Raj to continue the kind of a thing? Because that adds a very interesting dimension of how people who become obsessed with one story, they become obsessed to the extent of neglecting their family, neglecting everything else, and that adds that character, a grey shade to the Anant Nag character. So that's interesting. But what made you say, I want the two stories to be narrated by two different people? Is it a very simple thing that you could not get dates or something like that?
Anand sir did not want to do the second installment. So I had to improvise.
Oh, wow. Okay. Do you know why he didn't want to do it?
I cannot comment on.
What did you and Bhuvan Gowda discuss when you said, these are the worlds I'm going to set in? What were your ideas about the color palettes?
I think we discussed a few references that we had seen. Also, we wanted to get the background right. The kind of world. This is fantasy. This is KGF. It should not look like what people have seen before. So we wanted something more barren. So I think it started off from there. And when it came to the colors, I think me and Bhuvan are very similar the way we think. We like it in monochrome,
right,
more often than not, or close to it at least, just to get that world, a different perspective of what that world is. And obviously, when you show Bombay, it has to be slightly colorful. Bangalore was even more colorful. But when it came to this particular world, I think it became very clear that we had to set it up in something close to monochrome. I think the coloring and everything else. It started off with the costumes, and then we went to the sets. When we spoke to Shivu sir also, he also brought in these different looking huts, and he said this will be in contrast to what the ground is.
Yeah.
The sand is. I don't think we discussed about this in length, but we all had this common idea that we have to be close to monochromes.
Yeah, you were on that same wavelength.
Correct.
Yeah, because especially in chapter 2, when let's say the color palette is like dark grey, whether it's Ishwari Rao's sari or whether it is everything kind of it's almost like a painting. There's like this representation of that particular mood. The earlier KGF from the first one, there was more fire and there was more like a yellowish kind of tinge to it, and there was a kind of darkening of that world in the second one, and there seemed to be a very specific idea throughout.
We didn't want one thing to stand out in the frame. It's either the character speaking, or maybe the lorry passing or something like that. We didn't want it to be colorful, where it's a big screen. Sometimes when you look at a big screen and you see just one bit of color somewhere, it probably your eye goes right there.
Right.
So I don't know, maybe we had this. It was very inherent in what we thought.
Right, and also when you show the outside people like Shetty Bhai or something like that, he's in pink colors, and there's also that one character in a jacket and that floral print. It really stands out because it is so
Andrews.
Yeah, which is so against everything that is inside this world, because all the suits that Yash wears or all the stuff that he wears, everything is like the single. There's not even a stripe or a pattern or a check or anything like that. So it's like a very designed kind of look to the
we put in a lot of thought for that, and Yash made sure that he looked a little different from, and the suits worked very well for him. Yeah.
It could be a coincidence, but when we first see the heroine, she's in a gold-colored dress.
Coincidence.
It's a coincidence, right?
Coincidence.
Because the second time I saw the movie back to back, I was like, oh my God, this movie is about gold and she's wearing this gold-colored dress. So that's kind of a thing. How do you see her? Because at the first, she was not very impressed with him. But when that one incident happens with the mother, she's like, okay, this is not the usual kind of rowdy kind of guy. She actually says that she loves him in chapter 1. But at the beginning of chapter 2, she kind of is taken hostage and he calls her entertainment. I found it a little strange that she did not say anything. Why did you have that choice?
So his intention was right, but the way he put it across was probably crass.
Right.
And he had a couple of intentions. One is he wanted her very close to him.
Right.
Second thing is, he was just telling all his partners that, maybe that was an excuse, but he wanted her to be very close to him at that point of time. Now, he was going to be the king of the world. He wanted a queen.
Right.
But he was never going to force her to do anything. But he wanted her around.
Right.
And that probably came across as hurting her. And she probably didn't forgive him for calling her an entertainment.
Right.
For a lengthy bit. And I think that character design is something that we probably lost somewhere in between because of the huge drama. We had to bring in a lot of adversaries into the movie at that point of time. So but we knew what we wanted her to do in the movie, how she was going to end the story and become very, very important for the whole story.
Right.
So that's probably not something that we designed perfectly, but I think it worked out well towards the end.
In chapter 1, she says that she is loves this guy, and she's also mocked by the people around her for that. But he has no time to think about her at all because he's so busy doing his mission in KGF. So we see her point of view, we never get his point of view. So in your head, what was he already kind of falling for her? Was he in love with her in part 1, chapter 1?
I think he was, but he was never going to be forceful on anybody.
Right.
This male ego.
Right.
Kind of a thing.
Right.
He liked this girl. The one thing that you can see is he was infatuated by her.
Right. Actually, his dialogues change when he almost he this very macho guy becomes a little silly in front of her when he's talking, kind of a thing. So
we wanted to place her in KGF because of the all important reason towards the end.
When I watched the two films together, that added a layer of, I don't know if this is the right word, but cruelty to his character, because he doesn't explain to her that he wants her as his queen, and he puts it in a crass way. He leaves it to her to find out that this is where you are and this is who I am, and kind of a thing. Did you not think of one, this is of course a hypothetical question, did you not want one scene where she probably said, dude, I was really in love with you, but now you're treating me like a piece of crap, and then he kind of explains a bit about himself, so that the audience also gets a little bit into his psyche. Because I understand that on the one reason, what is really keeping him so enigmatic is the fact that the only thing that really seems to matter to him is that one single goal that he is on. But in the middle, there are little detours. He becomes a little more human when he's in KGF, in the early part at least. He's humanized a bit. Similarly with her, did you think of such a part where they have at least one little conversation or a fight or something like that, where she kind of thing, instead of her just rushing to him at some point and saying, I love you, and then the love story starts?
We did have a different sort of an approach to it, but we had to pull it out.
Because of time?
Because not just of time, somehow it felt like, we didn't have to really sit and explain that particular thing. It felt like an extra piece with what was happening. The drama was running so quickly. Things were changing so fast. He was changing a lot of things in KGF, and that had repercussions elsewhere. And right in the middle of that, we had to sit and explain something like this. And it would have made sense if we weren't headed for something much bigger at that point of time. Adira's entry.
Right.
So that that was something that we already had put into the plot, but it was a different approach. Just felt that, we had to remove it because we had a bigger picture.
Right. So what was it when you had written it that way before you removed it?
So she has a conversation with her mates, and right before she yells at these kids, saying that all of you get out of here. You always keep saying Rocky, Rocky, Rocky.
On the staircase, right?
On the staircase.
Yeah.
And after the whole Tufan song is over, she comes back, and she has a conversation with the mates, and they give her an explanation that makes her realize that maybe she's reading him all wrong.
Right.
I think the bigger picture, is we put all these things in and we edit it, and sometimes we look at the pacing of the movie.
Yeah.
You don't want something to just stop for a second and then move on.
Yeah.
I think it got lost with that somewhere. I know that it's not my proudest moment, the way we have handled that character, but the way it goes in the second half,
and
something that
the way she ends this one. Yeah. Another question about Rocky's psychology. I just wanted to know a little bit about what he felt about her. Now I want to know what was running through his mind when he lets Adhira go after the Kalashnikov scene, because there is a reason Adhira lets Rocky go after just wounding him, because he says, I want your people to see you not as a demigod but as a mortal man, and you're wounded and you're falling and you're vulnerable and weak, and he wants to send him back in that state. What is the reason Rocky lets Adhira go instead of just saying, this guy's going to be a pain in the ass, I'm just going to shoot him?
I think it is his ego. The way he lived his life is, he never owed anybody anything. He really never owed anybody anything.
Okay.
And the thinking behind that was that when he let him go for whatever his reasons were, he was also going to let him go, because he couldn't go on knowing that, that guy had let him live and he did not. And that plays into the whole equation. Though he's a businessman and everything else, he has seen his weakest side now. So he doesn't mean much to him. He has seen enemies all his life while he was growing. He's seen so many adversities. So Adhira didn't mean much to him at that point of time. Even if he was to think logically, but I think even if he thought logically, I think he would have still let him go, because he did not want to owe anybody anything.
Okay.
That's the kind of ego that we have already shown throughout. I think this is another example of it.
You introduce Adhira and the Prime Minister in chapter 1. There's probably a very simple Anantnag-like explanation to this question as well, but why don't you show their faces?
We were still making a Kannada movie at that point of time.
Right. You weren't sure who you were casting at that point.
We didn't, and also, it's going to cost a lot of money for them to just come and do a single day's work, or maybe 2 days' work, just to put their faces in there and all. I did not want to, even if I had cast them at that point of time, I wouldn't have shown their faces. It's just a way of keeping that mystery going for the next one.
Right.
So I think it was. I was very happy the way it was, because and also we hadn't cast anybody in that role. We were just contemplating, and of course, when chapter 1 became bigger, that became an easier way to approach them and ask them to do these roles.
Right. Now, you like to break scenes, and we talked about your editing, FCP, so on and so forth. Now, in Ugram, there's this part where the hero's friend is telling him about something, and you keep cross-cutting constantly to the bad guys planning to kind of attack. There's a constant cross-cut that keeps happening at that point. During that blind man incident in KGF, he lifts the hammer, and you show a cross-cuts to a number of things. One of them is a surprising microsecond shot of the mother of the girl child. Tell me your philosophy of editing. It's like you want to include the world in that what that action means to everybody in KGF. How would you explain that? that shot of the mother coming there, because even if you took out that shot of the mother, the scene might probably play as well. But because you put in the mother, you're kind of seeing the repercussion of that lifting the hammer a little more. So just tell me a bit
I
about...
think that was an edit call also, because we had built up to that scene
Right.
with such a strong drama, a girl child being
Yeah.
born in KGF, and how it was not going to survive, and how that actually became the most important part of the movie at that point of time.
Right.
Without realizing, it got to him. That that's the human side of Rocky, that it got to him. And I think it all came together because it was like, enough is enough. We've had enough of this. We need somebody to pick up a hammer and beat the hell out of these people. So I think that sat very, very well with that emotion. But it definitely was not there in the writing.
It was not in the writing. Yeah.
It was after watching. Sometimes when you watch somebody perform and they've done such a good job, you want to build on something.
Yeah.
We improvise.
Right.
All of us.
Right.
In cinema. So the way we have written it, somebody does better than what we've written it. We want to stay with that particular moment, and I think that was very apt, because we were going to this particular scene with that emotion.
Yeah.
And that was bearing heavily at that point of time. So we wanted to bring back that
The mother. In KGF 2, you actually build more on this, because you also go a little back and forth in time. And I think when Ramika Sen is being sworn in as the Prime Minister, there's one section where she's delivering that I'm taking this oath or whatever it is. And then she's also talking about sacking the Home Minister. So there's like two parallel events that are happening there. We again have a non-confidence motion being cut with a shootout. And the unmasking of the criminal mastermind, again, it's a barrage of dialogue and action. He did this at this point, he kind of did this, he's the one who led this person there, all that kind of stuff is happening. And our audiences are used to a kind of a hand-holding approach of storytelling, right? At any point, this worked sensationally on screen. It's like because it was like, it added so much momentum, and it was also like that epicness of everything reflecting on everything else was there. But I'm just thinking about the director at any point, at any point you to stand back as a member of the audience and say, am I going a little too fast for the audience? Am I should I slow down a bit here? Should I just like extend this shot a little more? Or did that ever happen?
So there's one person who always kept reminding me that this is also my movie. I'm not just making a Yash movie, and that was Yash. He kept telling me that, you're bringing in something new to the audience since Ugram. He said the way you have edited Ugram, the way you have edited Chapter 1. And I had this conscious decision that I wanted to make, that, I thought Chapter 1 was very fast. And I said, I want people to understand the drama a little better. So let's, not do all that mishmash. And he said, no, that's probably one of the reasons that people love the movie in its entirety, is because there's an essence of what you do.
Right.
So don't remove that. And he kept reminding me about this again and again. And sometimes I would take it out of the edit and he would watch it and he'd say, what have you done? Put it back. So I think he was the most important reason that I still kept that pattern of edit in Chapter 2.
Right.
Because he had that conviction that will work. Doesn't matter that people do not understand it the first time. They understand the essence of the scene.
Yeah.
They understand that you have brought in a very powerful person at that point of time, Ramika Sen. You cut it how many more times you want, but they will understand that she's very powerful. She's very integral to this. And they're going to keep whistling. They won't listen to your dialogues, don't worry, is what he kept telling me. And I think the intercut pattern is something that I've always loved to tell.
Yeah.
Whenever I think that a scene has to be a little more vibrant than it already is.
Right.
Like when you talk about the scene where the no confidence motion is happening, I just wanted a sense of the whole world of KGF collapsing. He was shot and he's losing control of everything around him. And now how is he going to recover from something like this? So I just wanted it to all to come together.
Yeah.
And it's because of him. You should blame him or you should compliment him.
Speaking of the Prime Minister, you already have a main villain in Adhira, in KGF. That is in the gold field itself, the mines. You have those sub-villains as well as a number of sub-villains and kind of stuff. Even with this, he would have had formidable obstacles to face. But then on top of all of them, you add the Prime Minister of India as the prime nemesis, kind of who's out to get him. So what made you say, I want to place this man on the national stage?
That's what would make the KGF look bigger.
Okay.
The challenge of getting something bigger. So the more challenges that you give a villain, the hero, the bigger the movie looks.
Right.
So and KGF, the way we've placed it, is like a kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
If he was just going to defeat just a few people to get it, then that kingdom would look that big. So you have to place it on a national level. And placing it on a national level automatically came in because you spoke about gold, which is, probably the most important commodity in India. Also, it gives you the sense of him wanting to achieve the world. Prime Minister was, I think, one of the first few characters that I wrote.
Okay.
Because I wanted a real challenge. And I just didn't want a challenge that looked like a gladiator movie. Like a real political challenge to this guy and, to Rocky and to more of his brain than his brawn, That's sort of a design.
There are many mothers in this movie. There's Rocky's mother. The heroine becomes a mother. It's the Ishwari Rao character who's a mother, and she remains almost like a surrogate mother till the end, like almost like she's carrying the spirit of his mother or something like that. Plus, there is the mother of the girl child in KGF Mines. Did you want like a constant reminder of motherhood throughout the movie?
With the bun scene, we wanted that.
Yeah.
Because his biggest emotion comes from there. Maybe there are other stories of brothers and sisters out there, but he didn't care.
Yeah, it's only mother that.
Yeah. So that got to him, and probably that was the only place that the chink in his armor that you could recognize.
Right.
And basically, it's running from his point of view, most of the scenes. So we had to highlight those portions.
Nice.
It was done by design.
Yeah.
But it is something that is like it seamless.
Yeah.
We wanted to make it seamless. We didn't want it to be in your face, bring in all the mothers in the world.
So you begin chapter 2 by this fairy tale like story of the sea of gold, right? Now, of all the ways you could have begun chapter 2 after chapter 1, why did this seem to be the best way to do
because
it?
we knew how it was going to end. We wanted to. Most of what has come from KGF is out of innocence. The boy is told. Maybe the mother just said it out of frustration. Maybe the madman just said it because he's been telling that to everybody who passes on that street. So we wanted this also to come out of innocence. It is something that stayed in his head. We wanted to revisit the childhood to show that is what stayed in his head more than anything else. That is his strongest emotion.
Right.
So, and we knew what was coming in the end. We wanted something very apt for that.
Right.
To begin with.
In the sense that, what did you know about it? You knew that he was not going to be killed by anybody but himself.
Yeah.
So you had the sea. That was your plan from the beginning for the end?
Always.
Okay.
Always. This was in the first narration itself, I think.
Like right at the beginning?
Right at the beginning.
Okay. Why the sea?
If you look at it back in the 80s and 90s, nobody had dived so deep into the ocean.
Right.
So
and that's actually a line in the movie. That
it's a line in the movie. So there was no other place for him to hide all that gold. He was dying the richest man in the world.
Because he was taking all that gold with him and nobody could ever take it from him.
Nobody
ever.
could take it.
Yeah. That's
But
lovely.
also that was a visual that you could see that, he was really dying the richest man in the world.
Yeah.
You cannot see it any other way. You cannot have the biggest ceremony and still not know it.
Yeah.
And that was by design.
No, and now that I think about it, like, it would not have had the same impact had he surrounded himself with gold and blown up his castle or something like that, because here it's almost like he's going to be buried with his gold, like falling into the sea with his gold.
Yeah.
And nobody can ever recover either him or the gold.
Yeah.
It's always going to stay with him. So
Yeah, and also that was the best hiding place in the world.
yeah.
Because you take it into the abyss, and not many people are going to look for something like it. It took them about 80 years to find the Titanic.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So that I think the Titanic story is something that stuck.
Let's talk about Ravi Basru's score, which is obviously something that is very much in spirit with the film. It's an overpowering score for an overpowering film, which is so strong on visuals and intercuts and on all those kinds of things. Is that something that you always saw, that the score should be a thunderous one with intercut only by the melody line, that tandane tane, that thing that goes once in a while to kind of this one? Is that how you always envisage the score?
So I think we were we wanted to do it very differently, and Ravi Basrur also wanted to make this very different from what chapter 1 was. But people were watching it again and again and again and again, and we didn't want them to see a different movie all of a sudden.
Right.
So that was also another conscious decision that we took, that we are not going to change the design of the music because they've loved something.
Right.
They've liked something, and they're probably they already know that this is a continuation of that.
Right.
We didn't want to all of a sudden do a Beethoven on them and show them something very different. We kept in tune with what we were showing in chapter 1.
Right.
So he also was bound by that. He wanted to do something much better and much bigger, and within that confines, I think he came out with a very, very good score, And I know many people probably thought it was louder than it should have been, but I think we had scenes like that going, scene after scene after scene. We had some sort of drama representation, which was something that, if we had mellowed down the music, then you would probably complain about it a little more than you would right now.
No, but I think the epic movies have always, like, if you look at Star Wars, for instance, it's a thunder score. Yeah. It's not a like yes, there are small themes every now and then, like you have the Mother's theme, but overall it's a thunder score. So I mean, it's not out of sync. But I was just interested in examining your dynamic and this is how the score should be.
We were bound to chapter 1, and also. Ravi Basrur is somebody who looks at the scene and he'll tell you that, it's not my mistake that I have to score back to back like this. It's your mistake that you're making scenes like this. So, he recognizes it, and he will not put any other sort of music, nothing mellowed down at all in a place like that. So he basically is a very, very good judge of what a movie is. And he'll tell you, he gives me a lot of inputs, even with the edit also. And I take it very strongly.
Why does the Prime Minister hesitate a bit to call the strike on Rocky at the end? Because all this while she's been, I want this guy out, we should capture him, we should do this, we should do that. But at the end, there's this hesitation in her, and she almost I think she bows her head or something, where it almost seems like, man, did it really have to end this way? Tell me about that one bit.
The very fact that you're ending a place of that grandeur, it doesn't matter if it came out of so much of malice, but I think it was to end something like that and to see the last of a criminal so big, to displace so many people from their homes. I think it was a combination of all those things, and it was a very difficult decision for her to make at that point of time, though she was ruthless. It's like you tell somebody that, I want that guy dead. And when knowing that, that fellow's right on the other end of the phone, holding a gun to his head, and you telling them to make that decision, I think you have to think about it a little bit, and it adds to the drama.
Right.
That's also another human side of her.
Yeah.
We just wanted to completely round off that character by saying that, she is the prime minister of an entire nation. Every person that she was displacing there, the bricks that she was bringing down there, she had to, have some sort of an emotion towards that particular situation. She's also like a mother, like in one way. She was also like a dictator. Though she came off as a dictator, she was like a mother.
Right.
And for her to have made such a big decision, it shouldn't have just been, just push the button already. So we wanted to bring in that emotion with her.
Where this is one scene where she's saying, "There's been enough war. Let's just have this peaceful talks with Burma," or something like that. I forget the exact lines, but then this thing happens, and then she's like, "Oh my God, go strike Burma." She's like, and then I just felt like, put myself in her head and said, "Oh my God, he's getting to her so much, like he's on her nerves all the time, that he's affecting her sense of judgment and like the way she is behaving." It shows how much, like, even though they're far apart and rarely in the same room, that how he's getting to her in that sense. So yeah. At the very end, there's a post-credit scene where this other audience substitute who's like moved, and like every time he's clapping or whatever it is, this chaiwala, the guy who brings the tea, he's moving the files, and he used to show KGF chapter 3. Is that just a tease, or is there really a possibility of chapter 3?
There is definitely a possibility of chapter 3. That also comes out of compulsion. People have loved this world, they've loved this character, and we're going to keep it going. We don't know when, but we're going to keep it going.
You already have an idea for it, I assume.
Of course we have an idea. We had an idea for it a long time back, actually.
Okay.
But right now, we just want to take a big break from KGF, and we will definitely come back to make that.
So thank you so much for answering these questions, because they were the kind of in my mind when I watched the movie, and thank you for taking a time off your busy schedule and
thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Prashanth Neel. If you do like this video, please subscribe to Galata Plus.